Hello everyone. Today we shall discuss the poem prescribed in your syllabus written by John Milton, and the poem is When the Assault Was Intended to the City. John Milton, a great name in English poetry, and he belonged to the Puritan age of the Renaissance period, born in 1608 and he died in 1674. Milton was a Puritan himself, but unlike the Puritans, he showed a strong inclination to art and beauty. He was a great poet. His early poems include Li Allegro, Il Penseroso, Lycidas. He wrote some great works like the epics Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained, as well as the dramatic poem Samson Agonist. And these were the poems which were written after he became blind. Milton also wrote some very wonderful and marvelous sonnets, and you have one of his sonnet in your syllabus, When the Assault Was Intended to the City. So before, let us understand what is a sonnet. When we look at the definition of sonnet, the sonnet is a short lyric poem which consists of 14 iambic pentameter lines linked by an intricate rhyme. So according to the rhyme scheme, there are two types of sonnets, the Italian or Petrarcan sonnet and the English or the Shakespearean sonnet. The Italian or Petrarcan sonnet is named after the 14th century Italian poet Petrarch, and in this type of sonnet we see that the 14 lines, they are divided into two groups, that is an octave and a sestate. Now an octave is a group of 8 lines, whereas a sestate is a group of 6 lines. So there is a particular rhyming scheme, like the rhyming scheme of this type of sonnet goes as ABBA, ABBA and CDE, CDE. The rhyming of this estate may sometimes vary, and it also appears as CDC, CDC. So Italian or Petrarchan sonnet, both in form and subject matter, was first imitated by Sir Thomas White in England in the 16th century, and it was later used by Milton, Wordsworth and others. We'll talk about the English or the Shakespearean sonnet when we take up Shakespeare's sonnet. Again, you have two of Shakespeare's sonnets in your. So the poem, When the Assault Was Intended to the City, goes as: Captain or colonel or knight in arms, whose chance on these defenseless doors may seize, if deed of honor did thee ever please, guard them and him within protect from harms. He can requite thee, for he knows the charms that call fame on such gentle acts as these, and he can spread thy name over lands and seas, whatever clime the sun's bright circle warms. Lift not thy spear against the muses' bar, the great Emathian conqueror bid spare the house of Pindarus when temple and tower went to the ground, and the repeated air of sad Electra's poet had the power to save the Athenian walls from ruin bare. So we see here that the poem, it consists of 14 lines, and these 14 lines are very clearly divided into two groups. That is the first group, that is of octave, which consists of the 8 lines, and then the last 6 lines form the sestate. So here we see that in the octave, the poet, he is making a plea, and his plea is to the royalist army, and Milton, he fears that his house might be attacked by the royalist army, and so he is requesting the royalist army not to attack his house. So when we look at the title of the poem, when the assault was intended to the city, city here stands for London, and Milton is talking about the attack of the royalist army in London. So Milton, he begins the poem and he addresses the captain, colonel and the soldiers of the royalist army, who he believes are about to attack London. And so the poet, he makes a plea that these army men, they should protect him and the defenseless doors of his house from all kind of harms. Now the poet says that he can requite thee, that means thee here stands for the army men, and he says that he can repay, he can requite, he can repay, because he knows the charms, that is, he knows the magic, he knows the magic, and that magic is that he can make these men popular, that is, he can write poems on them and he can immortalize their names all over the world, that is, all over land and seas, wherever the sun's bright circle warms, that is the whole universe. He's talking about the whole universe. That is, he says that if these army men, if they protect him and his house, then he would repay. And how would he repay? He would repay by writing poems on them and by making them popular, by bringing fame to them. That is, he would immortalize their names all over the world, and by writing poems on their gentle deeds. So this is the plea that the poet makes in the octave. Then when we come to the sestate, he says, lift not thy spear against the muse's bar. Now he's asking the army men not to raise their weapons against the muse's bar. Muse is the goddess of poetry, and since Milton is a poet, he considers his house to be the house of the muse, that is the house of the goddess of poetry, and therefore he says that his house is sacred because it is the muse's bar. And so he says that the army men, they should not raise their weapons against the muse's bar, which is sacred. Next, the poet, he gives examples. He gives examples from the past to support his plea. So he talks about the great Emathian conqueror, that is Alexander, and he says that when the great Emathian conqueror, that is Alexander, when he sacked the city of Thebes, the temple and tower were destroyed, but the house of the great poet Pindar was spared. He gives another example, and he says that the Spartans also, the Spartans, they were about to attack Athens, and but they refrained from attacking Athens because when they were about to attack, then they heard a part of a tragic play, that is Electra, being performed. Now, Electra was a tragic play written by Euripides, and therefore the Spartans, they refrained from attacking Athens. So Athens was spared. So here in this estate, we see that to make his plea strong, Milton, he gives examples from the past. So when we look at the poem, we see that the poem, it is well divided into an octave and a sestet, and the rhyme scheme also of the rhyme scheme of the poem is ABBA, ABBA, and then CDC, DCD. So the poem is a clear-cut example of an Italian or a Petrarcan. These are some of the important facts about the poem that you should know. The poem, it was written in 1642, and it is an Italian or a Petrarcan sonnet, and we have seen that the 14 lines, they are divided into an octave and a sestet, and they are written in iambic pentameter, and the rhyme scheme is ABBA, ABBA, CDC, CDC. And the occasion of the poem, it was the civil war between the king and the parliament, that is between the royalists and the republicans. And Milton, he was a republican, and he feared that the royalist army would attack London, and hence his house would be attacked. So through this sonnet, he makes a plea to the royalist army to spare the defenseless doors of his house, to protect him and his house. Milton wrote this sonnet to be displayed on the door of his house in London, and hence it was originally titled Written on His Door. So written on his door was the title which was earlier given to the poem. So this is all about the poem, and we will be discussing the important question and answers in the next lecture.